I did not set out to be an environmental activist. However, life presented many challenges and opportunities that compelled me to act to protect first my family and do my part to safeguard the earth's resources for future generations. The values instilled by my parents and shaped by my Catholic faith and education guided me and lit my path. My journey begins in Brooklyn, New York. I was born to two hardworking parents, John and Dorothy Jessic. My father called my mother a POC, which is Pillar of the Church. So I received extensive Catholic education, and here I am in my communion dress. But I was very grateful for that education. I was a shy, obedient, kind, and helped my mother care for my siblings. I did not seek confrontation, but that would change. 4 children followed quickly behind me. And like many immigrant families, my father moved his to 10 miles south to New Jersey, which was the country back in those days. He bought a home with a 1/4-acre property. Now, he had lived in an apartment, so he thought he had so much land. And he planted it with all his favorite trees, shrubs, flowers, vegetable garden. He loved, though, to keep his lawn perfect and weed-free. And he heard about DDT. He thought it was like magic. It took away all the weeds. My brother remembers bags upon bags piled in the garage. In the summer of 1962, my youngest sister, Karen, became ill and died that fall of acute leukemia. As the oldest child, I was 13. I led the family procession behind the white casket. And it's something that you can never forget this. It really shook my family to the core. And my father also lost his job. So he ended up remortgaging the house, buying a business. My mother went back to work. Gratefully, my parents held themselves and the family together. Now, DDT was banned in 1972. In doing research for my new book on sustainable gardening for the Southeast, I came across a study that concluded exposure to residential pesticides during childhood was positively associated with childhood leukemia. I graduated from high school and went off to Immaculata College to study biology. I was the first in my family to go to college. So on move-in day, it's much different. It was much different then. My entire family put on, you see, they're in their Sunday clothes. I'm in a suit to drive the 2 hours to Pennsylvania, and with me and all my stuff, including a manual portable typewriter that my grandfather bought me. I know I'm dating myself. So I studied biology. That was what I had hoped to do, and it was tough. First of all, my parents had very little money, so my entire mother's salary paid my tuition, and my grandfather pitched in too. And my parents really couldn't give me much support. They were struggling themselves. And then to add insult to injury, my boyfriend was killed, my first boyfriend, between freshman and sophomore year in college. However, I made some great friends. And this is Margie Molnar. She is a mother of 5, grandmother of 11, and we are still friends today. And it's people like that sustained me. After graduating from college, there's my graduation. I went to work at Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory at Columbia University. And there I am in the front row, having a good time with one of the graduate students. But I was very, very excited to have this job. Essentially, it was an NSF grant to look at past climates to predict future climates. And I worked with a very famous scientist. I'll show you here. Dr. Pierre Bisquet is the one that hired me. I am still friends with him today. Dr. Wally Broker, it was his grant. And essentially, the study that we were working on, I said, it was to look at past climates to predict future climates. But he, in 1975, realized that there was a warming trend. And so he wrote a paper about that. Our study showed that we were going into an ice age. But he, in the 1980s, was on PBS, absolutely raging, so scared that we are going into this global warming situation. Now, at work, I worked with a mother of 4 children, Paul Varlamoff. And we were X-raying deep sea sediment samples for a variety of minerals down a sediment core. And that was looking at, again, differences in past climates and what the minerals were in those times. And one summer day, in walks her son, Ivan. He was attending an engineering college, Jesuit school, in Belgium, and he was there for the summer. And I was assigned to work with him. I was so excited. Now, this is the 1970s, when students had long hair, were protesting on campus, and in walks this well-mannered, I thought, drop-dead, gorgeous, good-looking guy with a French accent. The chemistry in the lab was undeniable. Love was in the air as we worked together in the dark, aligning an X-ray diffractometer. It's a long story with that, too. Oh, I forgot to show you. In the that middle photo there, that's my mother-in-law, my future mother-in-law. In 1974, we got married. And I have to say, this one life decision was paramount to my happiness and my well-being for my whole life. I find it extraordinary that we found each other so young. And in fact, it's 48 years since we first met at 21 years old. As I say always, Ivan is a wind beneath my wings. 4 days after we got married, we went to live in Belgium and then moved to Tehran, where I had 2 children. Pierre and Neil were born there. And in the late 1970s, there was a revolution brewing. So we had to leave. We went back to Belgium, then South Carolina, and then Phoenix, where Paul was born, and then we went to Minnesota. Beautiful picture. You'd never suspect that for the next 7.5 years, almost, I'd be fighting to shut a landfill. 6 months after we moved into our home, a landfill company, Browning Ferris Industries, called us to a meeting to tell us that they were going to expand their landfill that was adjacent to our home. That's 2 blocks away. We had no clue the landfill was even there. And I remember that meeting very well. The men were so angry. And they said, "You're not going to do this. We will not let this stand." And that was great, except they had children to families to attend to. They had work to go to. And so eventually they burned out. Then the women took over. The moms. Well, we were home during the day with our children. So we went to the meetings, brought the youngest. Paul was at many meetings, my son Paul. And the reason I got so involved when the men gave up is because contamination was found in the wells just off the landfill site, and which meant that the landfill was contaminating these wells. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, lost my sister at 5, Paul is 4, this doesn't feel right, I've got to get involved. So in 1984, I invited the neighbors to the house, and we started getting reorganized. I approached many environmental groups for help, and they all said, "You got to be kidding. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. What are you thinking? You cannot win this. There's no way." So I said, well, I guess I'll form my own environmental group, and so we did. We formed our own nonprofit. And I'm I mean, there was so much at stake. How do you not do something? So during the day, we go to all the hearings, the moms and I, and one day, BFI caught me, one of the lawyers caught me in the hallway and said, Susan, you are just a mother. You cannot win this fight. Like I'm the lowest life form on earth. So I was so upset, I started crying. And then I left and I said, there's no way, this guy's not going to stop me. So we just said, no, we're just going to dig in. So we studied the process, requested environmental impact statements, and delved into the background of the company. They gave quite a bit of money to a lot of the political campaigns, but they were involved with the mafia too. And we thought, oh my God. But we said, you know what, let's just keep going. We have to do this. Because we were in the newspaper like this, one of the residents, a whistleblower, came to me and said, you know, I used to work at the landfill, and I was there when they dumped toxins in the middle of the night in this landfill. So, and they were pesticides, many of them, outdated pesticides. So then I realized, okay, that's why we have toxins in the well water. It quickly became evident that we could not do this alone. I mean, we knew nothing about what we were doing, lobbying, testifying. So a state representative, Sidney Pauley, said, why don't you hire a lawyer? I had no money. We had no money. She said, I will give you my campaign donors, and you can call them for money. So I did. I put the boys to bed every night, and I dialed for dollars. I was able to raise enough money to hire Grant Merritt, and he was the first head of the Pollution Control Agency in Minnesota. He had also fought a very successful case involving citizen activists, and he was very happy to take this on. So we would go together, and he taught me how to lobby. He taught me how to testify a bit, but that's scary business when you're a young mother. I was 33 years old. And so I'm trying to represent the community. And so I would call my friend Mary Cooper, also a mother of three, and said, Mary, she could not come because her children were very young. I said, Mary, please pray for me tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I'm going to have to testify. And she did, and I was okay. But I did a lot of praying in those days, and here's where my Catholic faith came in. This was so hard. And I look back and I'm thinking, what in the world was I thinking, taking on this? So I said, Thomas Merton has some beautiful prayers. So I said some of those prayers. But what I would do is when I was going to testify, I would go to the Catholic church and park in their parking lot. It was free. And then I would go to the church and pray. Prayers of Thomas Merton. I studied the writings of Hildegard of Bingen. She lived in the 12th century in Germany, and she saw what contamination was doing to the cities, and she has some beautiful writings. My pastor, Father Tim, was so good at counseling me because he was telling me even how to speak to the press. I would say, I'm fighting BFI, and he said, no. He said, we are defending the health and safety of our families. He said, use we, you're representing the people. He gave me many books to read on moral decision making. I also look for inspiration in the lives of great leaders. Grant Merritt gave me the biography of George Washington. And then I read these words of Yevtushenkov, who's a Russian poet, and I thought they were very good, and I'll read them. Half measures can kill when on the brink of precipices. We strain and foam because we cannot jump just halfway across a chasm. In other words, get strong, get tough, or you will fall in that chasm. On my birthday on November 18th, it's coming up, I testified at a very important hearing, and we lost. I brought my whole family there, and Ivan was there with happy birthday balloons. So he's throwing up these balloons. I am crying. The kids are all over. And basically they gave the right of BFI to expand the landfill. And I thought, there's nothing else we can do. Luckily, I found Lois Gibbs. And she was making headlines at the time. She got her community that lived on Love Canal, she got them relocated off this toxic dump. Her story is horrible. They put a school on top of a toxic landfill. And the kids, their legs were burning, they were getting sick, they were dying. Jimmy Carter was president. It took him a while before he took these children off there. But anyway, she formed an organization that helped communities like hers and like ours. I contacted her. And basically they said, you really have to get tough publicly or you're going to lose, which translated into headline-grabbing demonstrations that will raise public opinion and show them how unjust your situation is. I had no experience in protesting. I went to Catholic schools, remember? I don't think you'd be protesting at Immaculata. So I called Greenpeace. Voila, a protest. They were great. I was so scared. So basically, this was a school bus blockade of the landfill on President's Day, and my 3 sons who are here were in that bus. And some of the landfill truck drivers thought it was hysterical, but it grabbed attention. And there are the guys from Greenpeace. They went up on the drive-in theater and they unfurled a BFI out sign. And I was talking to the press. That was my job. Now you notice I have my Sunday coat on. I didn't want to look like a radical. And it was President's Day, so I thought, let me get some president's wise words. So these are from Thomas Jefferson. He said, when things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, the citizens, when well informed, can be relied on to set them right. And that is true. That is true. I said, expanding this toxic landfill 2 blocks from our house is unjust, and we're going to stop it. Again, I was very bold in those days, goodness. Several days later, we were granted a contested case hearing. Now, what we did was we held this demonstration before a big decision. A contested case hearing is when they take the case out of the regulatory agencies and into court. And that gives a delay. It takes a long time to make its way through the courts, which would give us time to raise public opinion in our favor. So with all this media attention, it even was in USA Today, by the way, the Attorney General, National Fish and Wildlife, many scientists came to oppose the landfill, including a scientist who said, a biologist, that landfill never should have been put there in the first place. At this point, I was absolutely exhausted. You can imagine, I was doing this all my waking hours and raising 3 sons. And I just didn't know if I can continue much longer. The landfill company had an uncanny way of trying to break my spirit too. On Halloween night, my boys may have remembered this, they asked me to go in for a deposition, expecting me not to go, because my boys would want to go out trick-or-treating. And I remember the boys being on the curb, and I came back home, and I said, I've got to go back out. And I said, the neighbors will take you, and they did. They took the boys trick-or-treating. I was glad. So basically, at this point, methane gas, which is a byproduct of decomposition, was detected in our subdivision. Methane gas can travel laterally. It can go in basements and explode. Okay, so this was against their permit. And the landfill was shut down, but the case continued in the courts. they were asked to bring that back into compliance. The case dragged on for years. And eventually my husband was transferred to Pennsylvania. I told the new leadership I would mentor them and testify as needed and fly back. As a going away present, the mayor gave me the key to the city and a proclamation. We had Susan Varlamoff Day in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Another young mother, Jerry Kohler, took the reins of this case and went at it with fresh energy, which I think was very good. I decided to get a master's degree at this point at Penn State University, which was close to our home in Pennsylvania, so I eventually could work in this field. And my research project was, shocking, the health and safety impacts to communities living near landfills. And I presented this research in court. I flew back with that research. Grant called me, the lawyer, to say that the governor was extremely concerned about this landfill. He'd been reading about this in the news. And there he is. He said he was coming to see the community and to see what the whole situation was. The community had only a few days' notice. And again, it was a few little subdivisions. 1,000 people showed up. And I was there too. To speak with him and say, my God, please help us. And he said, he was so upset. He said, what are we doing? Trying to expand a landfill in this community with all these children. And the kids were out running all over. He said he was going to look into it. Fighting the landfill in Eden Prairie, Minnesota was very expensive for the city. They had to hire Grant Merritt and many experts to testify. So if they did one final thing, they said, we want to see what the will of the people is. So they held 3 town hall meetings in the biggest spaces in town, 2 churches and the high school, to see if people cared. Thousands of people turned up, thousands. And I went back to testify in the high school. And when I saw 1,000-some people there, I was shocked. What began in my living room with like 5 people had expanded to 1,000, thousands of people. And so I said, you can be heroes in this precedent-setting case. It was a precedent-setting case if we would win it. The Berlin Wall just came down. It gave us so much hope. And I said, if Germans can tear down the wall, we can shut this dump expansion. The mayor and the city council voted 4-1 to continue fighting. The one vote was the mayor's. He was actually bought off by the landfill company. In August of 1990, BFI was drilling a well to put in their methane extraction system to pull the methane off the landfill and flare it because it had gone over the property. As they were drilling, there was an explosion and there were fires. Okay, this was again against the law. Back in Pennsylvania, after finishing my day at school as a teacher's aide, I came home quickly to get Pierre to go to his orthodontist appointment. Pierre's right back there. And he was so agitated. He said, Mom, you've got to come in the house. I said, Pierre, get in the car. We're running late. He said, no, Mom. So he's pulling me by the arm into the house, put on the answering machine, and then I hear BFI threw in the towel. They pulled the permit to expand the landfill. The overwhelming opposition in the community, plus violating the law again, they realized they had no chance. Lincoln was right. Public opinion is stronger than corporate greed and crooked politicians. We were able to summon the better angels of the community and win this case. I chronicle the story in the book, The Polluters. A Community Fights Back. This case took 8.5 years. at the same time it took George Washington to fight the Revolutionary War. That's unbelievable. I spent nearly my entire 30s, really my best years, doing this because I felt it was so, so important. Our time in Minnesota was short. My husband's company shut down their facility there, and we were relocated to Georgia. This would be the 12th move. Pulling up roots again was very painful. I could not complete my master's work at Penn State, but I was grateful that Georgia Tech accepted me to finish up. Following graduation, Senator David Scott called me and asked me if I could help him prevent the expansion of a landfill in his African American neighborhood. Deja vu. I said, oh my God, that is so hard. I hesitated. He said, listen, just come and see my neighborhood. Now, he's a U.S. representative now. And I fell for it. So I went to his neighborhood, and I was shocked to see it was just full of garbage. There were 4 open landfills in his neighborhood. It's in Atlanta, the Live Oak landfill. Trash had blown from all these landfills. And they were trying to expand one like double the size. And he said, I can't let this happen. These are my people. When I saw this, I said, my God, these poor people are defenseless. And they were. They couldn't do anything about it. And the company was standing to gain millions of dollars on their backs. This was the largest garbage company in the world. It's still in existence. BFI, by the way, lost $36 million. The case was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and they were bought off a few years later. This company's still in existence. So I said, okay, David, I'll help you, kind of mentor him. So he had different tools than we had. So he wrote a bill, tailor-made for the situation. It said a landfill could not expand with another landfill within a 4-mile radius. There were like 4 landfills within a 4-mile radius. I testified as an expert witness before the Senate and Natural Resources Committee. I had my degree, and so I could do that. And I basically said the landfill was too close to the neighborhood. It was a health and safety hazard. I knew that from my research. I said it was totally immoral that they would even consider it. And then I threw in some scientific reasons and the second law of thermodynamics to impress the head of the EPD who was there, who's an engineer. And Paul, my youngest son, was there. And it chokes me up a bit. He and his friend Matt were there as pages that day. And they stood in the back of the room, and they saw me defend these people. I can still remember testifying because the room is dark paneled. And a woman came up to me from the neighborhood, and she said, "Thank you, pretty girl, for helping us." As the fans turned overhead in the dark paneled room, I felt like I was on the set of To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm from New York, so those things, resonate with me. We don't have those kinds of scenes in New York. So as David and I were strategizing in his office, a governor's aide came to him and said, "David, back off." He said, "No way. There's no way." And then David reminded him of the knowledge he had about the governor's close relationship with a certain female landfill employee. I was like freaked out. Oh my God, get me out of here. And David and the guy said, he said, "That's finished." David said, "No, it's not." And the guy went stamping out. We also knew that this landfill company had donated very generously to many of the politicians' campaigns. David was the chairman of the Rules Committee. Every bill that became law had to go through his committee. So he called me one night and he said, listen, do you think I should hold back every bill until I get the signature of the sponsors for these other bills? Get the signature on my bill. And I said, this is going to be the toughest fight you fight here probably. I said, you're going to have to go all out. So it made the front page of the paper the next day. Anyway, the governor signed. He won in both houses. And the governor signed the bill at nearly the last hour of the last day that he could. Again, Lincoln was right. Public opinion was in our favor. Justice was done. At the time, it never occurred to me that I had prevented the world's first and second largest garbage companies in the world from making billions of dollars with their landfill expansions. I would soon pay dearly for that. You know what, that's a recent picture of David and I. He came to UGA to speak, and I told him about the fact that, I haven't told you about, all right, I'll wait. I'm giving the punchline before anyway, I suffered as a result of what I did for him. And he said, Susan, God takes care of his angels. And when I am having a tough day, I remember those words. After graduate school, I was hired to work at the Pollution Prevention Assistance Division of the Department of Natural Resources as a pollution prevention specialist. Perfect for me. Within 3 years, I was promoted twice. Then one day, my boss came into my office and said, what is that company that you fought in Minnesota? What's the name? And I said, well, Browning Ferris Industries. He said, oh, a representative came to talk to me and asked me to fire you. But he said, I'm not going to do that. You're a great employee. Another one of my colleagues came to me a few weeks later and said, whoa, he said, I don't know what you've done, but I saw representatives of 2 landfill companies. They were really upset with our boss and said, fire her. I was like, oh my God. So, a few weeks later, I was called into my boss's office. He seemed shaken up actually that day, and he said, I'm going to have to let you go. I said, well, why? I've gotten fabulous reviews. I was flabbergasted. I had established an environmental justice project with the city of Atlanta. I helped write the Georgia Georgia Solid Waste Management Plan and took it to hearings around the state. I set up a partnership with Georgia Tech to help companies reduce energy and waste. And I was also the liaison to the Research and Education Garden in Griffin. And he said, Georgia law does not require me to tell you why I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I never connected the dots. I didn't put it all together until a wise environmentalist said to me, follow the money. And then I told him my story and what I did with the landfill companies. He goes, that's it. I was inconsolable. I was so upset. I thought I would never work again. I was blacklisted by the government. But miraculously, a position came open at the Research and Education Garden, University of Georgia, at the Griffin campus for a program coordinator. And I had been a liaison there. There it is. This is in the garden, and I got this bench for my sister in honor of my sister, the one that died. And I really loved the job, but it was a 130-mile round-trip commute. I was so happy to work. I was so glad to work that I did it. We had children going to college, and we needed the money to help pay their tuition. One of the things I did there was a water quality study that showed that the pesticide levels in urban areas like Atlanta were much higher than in rural areas where the farmers, by the way, you can see I've changed from garbage to gardening. I made that switch because I figured that I couldn't continue anymore in waste management. And regarding pesticides, these pesticide levels were killing fish in urban areas. And the farmers were obviously doing things right. Pesticide levels were low. Pesticide applicators in Atlanta that are professionals take training with UGA. They must be certified. And they are trained to use minimal amounts of pesticides. But who is training homeowners? No one. So I applied for a grant to EPA. First, we did a survey. And again, my former boss paid for this. I have to say that he was once an environmental activist himself. I think he felt very badly about what happened to me. He paid for my position in Griffin for 2 years. And I feel his hand was forced by the governor. And anyway, so he paid for the survey too. We surveyed the state homeowners, oversampled in Atlanta, and found out that people were very interested in gardening to protect the environment, but they wanted more information. So I wrote an EPA grant, I received it, and we wrote best management practices for Georgia homeowners to reduce chemical use in gardening. And they were a huge hit. And so that eventually, even on one snowy day in Gwinnett County, and this was before plows, they had 100 people show up at one of the workshops. So I felt we were successful. And so that's why I wrote Sustainable Gardening for the Southeast. It's not just involving water, it's involving many other issues, including climate change in gardening. When this grant was over, I applied for a position on the Athens campus, which was only 100 miles round trip. Oh, that's the book. But I had a wonderful boss, and it was a very good, here we are at UGA. Now we all know that's the Ugga dog. I went on a faculty tour, and we all got to pet the dog at the end. So I hate to say it, but I've never been to a football game. My sons have, but I haven't. And they went to Georgia Tech and Barry. But anyway, I was glad to be at the headquarters, so to speak. And I worked in the Office of Environmental Sciences within the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. One of my first jobs there was to turn around the bad image of farmers and even the college, because the farmers were being accused of polluting the land and the water. And so I knew the environmental community very well. We had worked together over the years. I was the president of their association. And so I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So the plan was to bring them to South Georgia to meet with the farmers and the scientists so they could see really what was going on. And so it took us a year and a half. We got a 12-passenger UGA van, and we went down I-75, picking them all up. We got to the research station, and the scientists were excellent, saying we use precision irrigation to make every drop count. The farmers, were talked, and then, of course, the environmentalists go in with their tough questions. And finally, one of the farmers said, listen, Sally, we drink from the wells on our land. Why would we pollute our land and water? Then we went to one of the farms. And again, it was one of these beautiful days, perfect weather. And the chemistry between all of us was fabulous. And finally, one of the farmers just kind of dug his heels into the earth and said, we are both people of the earth. Let no one divide us again. And to this day, the farmers and the environmentalists are on very good terms. Over my 18 years of working at the University of Georgia in Athens, I became the director of this unit. And my job was to find opportunities to do for our faculty, research, education, extension faculty, to work on environmental issues in Georgia and in the region, and even nationally if possible. So there's a few projects I'm very proud of, and so I will give these few. During the severe drought of 2008, Dr. Carol Couch came to me and she said, I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain the drinking water for Atlanta. And I said, listen, I work with the Extension Service. They have the ability to take information out across the state and educate the people very quickly. And so we signed an MOU with the EPD, and within months, the extension agents were doing workshops around the state. They were on TV, they were on the radio. We saved the water supply. Water consumption went down 26% in Atlanta. It was a huge win. And what we did was we created a water conservation ethic that to this day is being practiced by Georgians. The water consumption has not rebounded to the levels before this drought. When the Atlanta Beltline was in its, that's a bit ahead, but I'll show it. When the Atlanta Beltline was in its planning stages, they were talking about soccer fields, walking trails, dog parks, aquifers. And I said, how about a farm? I work in the College of Agriculture, of course. And they said, well, I don't know, Susan. Anyway, we found a piece of land, a bad piece of land, unfortunately. It had been contaminated. But after 4 years, we remediated the contamination. We put in topsoil. We put in a well. And today, those young farmers are farming a very thriving farm. And I just saw them last year. I was so happy to see that.
What farm is that?
It's, I don't know. It's on the west side on the Beltline. There's only one farm on the Beltline. On another occasion, the Atlanta mayor decided, he put out a sustainability plan. He was talking about all the things he was going to do: reduce water, reduce waste, recycle, reduce energy. I said, how about a farm? And first he said, well, I don't know. And then they decided, that's a great idea. So they were going to put a farm across from City Hall. And they were going to have a competition, design competition. So the landscape design department at UGA is like bar none, the first in the country. So I let all these young people know, and they were out there designing. And so a UGA student won the design competition. Now, that farm never did go in. They decided they'd too high-priced land to put a farm in. But that young man is now the first and only director of urban agriculture in the country, and he's Catholic. He goes to our green masses. Mario, he's a great guy. Basically, we are putting farms in Atlanta, and I was quite involved in that, in areas where they don't have supermarkets, in food deserts. And that sort of resonated with me because, and Mario too, we're Catholic, we're supposed to feed the poor. And so today we have 7 urban farms, many community gardens, and school gardens. The UGA Cooperative Extension does all the training for these farmers. And in appreciation for what we had done, Fulton County, that's me at the press conference with the mayor. He had a press conference, and he asked me to discuss this competition and the importance of farming in the city. And again, I was scared to death. I asked the dean if he would speak instead of me, and he said, no, the mayor didn't ask me. He asked you. So I did it, but then Fulton County was extremely pleased with all the urban agriculture we had going on, and they issued a proclamation thanking us. and I accepted on behalf of the University of Georgia. In the early 2000s, students became very interested in attending a university committed to sustainability. The University of Georgia had no such program. President Adams flatly said in 2008, we're not doing it, got no money. And the students were very persistent, and I was too, and a number of the faculty. And we had an organization called the Academy of the Environment. We were having a conference, and I invited Ray Anderson, who's a world-renowned corporate sustainability expert, and to speak. And he spoke to the 400 students and faculty, and he said, you have to make sustainability, on your campus very important. It's got to be the way you do things. And so the students said, well, how can we pressure our administration? He said, you have to. So it was like magic. We had sustainability events around campus. And if you're on campus with students, they do their own thing. They decided sustainability events here, there. A year later, we had a luncheon with the Academy of the Environment. And I asked President Adams to come again and speak about sustainability. And he did, and he said, wow, there's something going on campus. We have all these sustainability events. And he said, okay. He told the students, do a study, find out where UGA is with regards to their peers on sustainability. Princeton ranks universities as far as their sustainability index. We were dead last, D-. He's very competitive, so he gave in. He said, okay. Prepare a sustainability plan to the faculty. I was asked to represent our college. And then the students at the same time, they knew it required money. So they assessed themselves a $3 fee, had to pass through the Board of Regents. It was granted. In fact, that model is being used by other universities in Georgia. And then at his State of the University address, he accepted the full sustainability plan, and they introduced the Officer of Sustainability, who is there today. And so UGA went from D- among their peers to a standout A- nationally among all universities. And that's their logo. The United Nations now has been issuing dire warnings for some time regarding global warming. They said if we don't reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, there could be catastrophic consequences for life as we know it. So I look for ways to engage our faculty, research, teaching, and extension in climate change, and realize that there was so much going on at the University of Georgia in all the different schools and colleges that we really need to try to bring together all of them to collaborate, to be more effective. And so we set up with my colleagues a Georgia Initiative for Climate and Society. That organization is still going strong. And it's led to the Georgia Climate Project, which is a 3-year project involving all the research universities in the state to look at the emissions in Georgia and ways to mitigate them. And we're trying to go climate neutral, make carbon neutral, to make recommendations to the government. At a national climate change conference in Washington, D.C., I attended a session on how faith-based organizations are dealing with climate change. There was zero representation from the Catholic Church. I was really upset. So I'm complaining to the guy next to me who happened to be on the board of this organization that put on the conference, and he said, hey, did you hear about what the Pope's doing? I said, no. He said he's coming out with an encyclical, environmental encyclical. So he said, write to him, ask Ask him if you can help. Offer your help. He said it 3 times. And I said, all right, all right. I will do that. I did, and of course I got a wonderful letter saying, thank you very much, I will pray for you. So that was a failed attempt, obviously. So I said, let me not give up on this one. So I went to Father Sonny, my pastor. I said, Father Sonny, can you get me a meeting with the Archbishop who reports to the Pope? And maybe he can ask the Pope. So I got an interview with the Archbishop, and he was so funny. The first thing he did was when he met me, shook my hand, he started laughing. He goes, Susan, what are you thinking, basically? You can't work with the Pope on the encyclical. This is an inside job. What I didn't know, they have a Academy of the Sciences, Vatican Academy of the Sciences. And they do have scientists, renowned scientists from all over the world. I was not obviously part of this. So, anyway, but he said, Susan, we need an outreach plan. I think I'm behind in my slides there. Yes, I'm right. And I said, okay, I can do an action plan for the encyclical. Now, the encyclical had not come out yet, but I knew it was coming out. So I called my friend Rob, who's Catholic, and a geologist, and he said, I'm in. I'll help you do it. So the two of us waited in June for the link from the Vatican to come up with the encyclical. It came up 4 in the morning. The two of us are downloading the document, reading it in 2 days, and then we started writing. And then we thought, what a good idea it would be if we could get other scientists to work with us from the University of Georgia. So we did, and we got some renowned scientists. And I was so pleased that they would agree to do this. One is Marshall Shepard. He's got his own TV show, and he's in Congress all the time, just met Obama. So these are the kind of people that offer to help us. And then, so this is the front page of the document that we did it in 6 months. And they did a beautiful job of laying this out. We had a kickoff at the University of Georgia in June of 2016. And we thought 20, 30 people show up. We had 200, 300 people come. It was an incredible day. And what was incredible was all these scientists could make it. Now, if anybody here works in academia trying to get all these scientists to do something on the same day, at the same time, in the same place, is like impossible. They all could make it. So I was given 5 minutes to speak, and I used my time to honor them because I felt they took a big chance on Pope Francis, Rob, and I. And it was a glorious day. And I will say in this picture, to the far right is Dr. Marshall Shepard, the Archbishop in the middle, me, and on the far left is the Dr. Reverend Durley. He walked with Martin Luther King back in the day, and he's a very good speaker. And he said the civil rights issue of our day is climate change. Let's see where we are here. That you can see the crowd there. This action plan is being used. It's the only one in the country. It's being used all over the country by archdioceses in Boston, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Savannah, and many others. And it's being used at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And Laura Turner and I were honored one day for the environmental work we had done. And that is a photo there. These are the various chapters in the action plan. Basically, their actions, they're ranked simple, intermediate, and advanced. There's something everyone can do. And it can be used by many different faiths. In fact, the scientists that worked on this were of various faiths and various disciplines. 3 years ago, I retired from the University of Georgia just to work on implementing this action plan. And what's incredible, too, is that in the Catholic Church in the United States, as far as climate change, environmental protection, they are looking to Atlanta. And I believe it's because we developed this and it's going out now through all the churches and schools. Ted Turner's son-in-law, Rutherford Seidel, was raised Catholic. And he gave us money for a pilot project that we use for poor churches. And it went so well that now he's hiring a sustainability coordinator for Atlanta. Scientists tell us that we have 10 to 12 years to avoid the worst effects of climate change. People of all faiths are deeply concerned. In 2017, I should show you, I lead the creation care team at my church that implements this action plan. And we've got the CEO of the parish there, Father Sonny, and all of us, a deacon, an engineer, the extension agent, many talented people. But there's tremendous concern now among all faiths for climate change. And this was the People's Climate March in Washington in 2017. And there were Buddhists and Hindus, Christians of all denominations, and Catholics were the biggest contingent, I believe, because of the Pope's leadership. And I was there. We went to Mass first, and then we went out. They had these huge banners that went right across Pennsylvania Avenue that they carried. There I am in the front where what I had was the front page of the action plan. And I had business cards in my pocket with the URL and my contact information that I liberally handed out to everyone. And there's the front page. As I said, climate change is the issue of the threat of our civilization. And I believe the Catholic Church can be a change agent in mitigating global warming and environmental degradation. We are 1.3 billion strong. Pope Francis urges all of us to cooperate as instruments of God to care for creation according to his or her own culture, experience, involvements, and talents. A strong movement is underway in the Catholic Church to green our churches and engage our parochial school students in learning to care for our earth. Pope Francis uses the metaphor of building a cathedral to try to engage us all with all of our talents. You see, it took 100 years to build this. You needed stonemasons, you needed artists, stained glass cutters, people wheelbarrowing sand, you needed cooks to cook for these people. Most of the people that worked on these cathedrals never saw the beauty of these cathedrals because it took so long. With this same spirit, we each need to do our parts to safeguard the earth resources for generations born and unborn. My husband and I just finished walking the Camino de Santiago. It was an incredible experience. We walked 108 miles. The pilgrimage is 1,000 years old. It follows the Milky Way across northern Spain. And Charlemagne, Dante, and St. Francis walked on this path. We began this journey with too much baggage, emotional and physical. And as we went along, we started trying to toss it off. We lived simply and we lived in the moment. At the Pilgrim's Mass in Santiago, the priest urged all of us to leave our baggage behind and light up our communities with good works. St. Francis says, start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. I would say what we did in Prairie was impossible, but we started off slowly. We have to answer this question. The parents of these children are right here. What kind of world do we want to leave our children? They're going into the unknown. Their future's uncertain. Will we have the courage to change our lifestyles to safeguard the earth's resources for them? My life's experience has shown me there is nothing insurmountable we can't accomplish if we unite behind a common cause. Tomorrow's children are counting on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Suzanne. Teresa's got a microphone. We have some time. We have about 20 minutes for questions or comments. If you just let Teresa know you want to have the microphone. Everybody's awestruck.
I would just like to say I've got my whole family, my husband Ivan, and my 3 sons, Pierre, Neil, and Paul, there with their wives and almost wife here. And the parents of those children, I do want to brag here. That little girl is 10. At 9, she won the Environmental Award for her school due to the good training of her parents.
So in in terms of where do we go from here, we've got a roadmap. Do you feel confident that there are enough of the masses out there that are beginning to follow the roadmap?
I think it's up to us who understand the situation to educate those that don't know, and we've got to create that movement. And there's a young woman named Greta Thunberg, you probably have read about her. When people say one person can't make a difference, a year ago she was a single protester in front of Parliament. This year 4 million students were on the streets. It can be done. She has a little video there with a scientist. It's a question, as far as climate change, we've got to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, we've got to stop cutting down the forests, and we've got to plant trees. And they say in the video, it's funny, there's this incredible machine that absorbs CO2 and it keeps growing. A tree. But the balance is totally off now. It's frightening. The other thing I wanted to say is that Marshall Shepard, you saw his picture, he's a climate modeler. They're always concerned about alarming the public, and their models were too conservative. Things are going much more quickly than they had imagined. We have to change quickly. And that's why I'm glad what we're doing in Georgia. I think the coal-fired power plants, and we know that the soil can do an awful lot as far as sequestering carbon, of course, trees. Here's another example of we can make a difference. At the turn of the last century, Georgia was planted in cotton from the mountains to the sea. Okay? The boll weevil came and decimated the cotton. The farmers had to think of another crop. Many of them decide on pine trees. Now, they're keeping climate records through this whole thing. The temperature went down 1 degree with the mass planting of all these trees. That's incredible. Yes?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Atlanta, Archdiocese and priests and their congregations. Are they preaching from the pulpit? Are they following Pope Francis? And the second part of my question is, with Wilton Gregory going to Washington, how will that impact things, do you think?
I hope positively. I have plans for Archbishop Gregory. He's so nice. He even came to Georgia Tech to appear on a faith-based panel for climate change, and all his robes and everything else. He says, I did it because Susan Varlamoff told me to do it. It's kind of scary. But I know reports to the Pope. The Pope has that. It's in Spanish too. As far as preaching from the pulpit, okay, with the sustainability coordinator, we're making a massive effort to go out across the state, the whole state. But the big thing is, one of the hooks is going to be, you will save money by becoming more energy efficient. And so we're doing energy, water, and waste audits. There's grants for them to retrofit their churches and schools. As Rutherford Seidel says, the job of the Catholic Church is to give to the poor, not enrich the power companies. So in having created a movement before, a third jump on quickly. We've got them. Got 30 to 40 already have done audits and all that. The next third look at what the first third have done, and they see the benefits. And the last third eventually come on because everybody's doing it. So we're going to try to move as quickly as we can. The sustainability coordinator will do these energy, water, and waste audits. The extension service, for example, we're trying to put in community and school gardens, feed people from the churches. And then the Archdiocese is doing the training as far as creation care teams through Kat Doyle's office. And I go out and speak at a Marietta talking about climate change. They were fired up. There's no shortcuts. There's a lot going on around the country as far as, there are some churches that are all paneled in solar panels, which is great. There's a few standouts in each archdiocese, but what we're trying to do is the hard work of creating a movement and going church by church, school, and it's working. Just one more thing. Why shouldn't the Catholic churches be demonstration sites for energy efficiency, water conservation, sustainable landscaping?
Well, first of all, I want to say you're really an inspiration. I really like your story because you show how you kind of, is it on? You show how you start where you are, and you were a young mother, and how you've just taken stepping stones. Not that you planned it that way, but it just worked out. I see a lot of these efforts in the schools to have farms, and the farms along the Beltway and in food desert areas. Can you talk a little bit about the actual impact of those farms in helping provide food for the communities?
They've done a lot of studies on that. And the thing with these community farms is much more than just providing food. It creates a safe place for people to be. When you've got people working in the gardens, the drug pushers, prostitutes, they all have to go someplace else because there's eyes and ears right there. It creates a safe place. It teaches people skills. It greens a neighborhood. People feel good. Crime goes down. That's a big thing. And it does provide fresh food.
Have there been public
Just Google benefits of community gardens. There's a ton of studies. Yes. Paul.
So this is more of a general question. Affecting change on any kind of scale, whether it's large or small, requires people to be focused and all pulling the cart in the right direction at the same time. How do you, or what do you think is the key to mobilizing people from the grassroots level and turn it into a large organization? How do you keep people focused when the pettiness comes in or life comes in and people become unfocused just due to being people? How do you keep them all going in the same direction, whether it's at the grassroots level, organizing a protest, or whether it's at the government level or in the private sector?
You have to inspire them, and you have to make it look like shutting the dump in back in the early days. We tried to make it fun, exciting. I have an education. 18 people came to second. Those people had so much fun. Bags from Kroger, and it's very hard. It's very hard. It's that's why I'm suggesting the Catholic Church or all churches, all faiths have sacred scriptures that call on their faithful to care for creation.
So would you say it's appealing more towards a moral or ethical or theological center?
Moral imperative. It's a moral imperative. It's a scientific imperative too. We cannot exist without these natural resources. We've become so insulated. In one of my first education sessions, there was a couple and their grandparents lived on a farm and they used to go there. The grandparents bought nothing. Everything was there on the farm. And they explained, I had to tell us all. And it's not easy, Paul. It's going to take a lot of people pulling in the same direction. But the exciting thing is, I think in Atlanta we've got it right. And we've got to create that model for the rest of the country. I'm in touch with leaders from all over the country in other archdioceses that want to learn from us. And some will have a big conference and you get all the same people. I said, no, you have to go church by church, and you've got to motivate the pastors to speak. They've got to speak from the pulpit. They don't always agree. Well, for example, one of the pastors in Georgia, I went to give him a check that they had earned from a grant. And he said, we can't continue because Ted Turner's involved and he's an atheist. I said, no, it's Rutherford, his son-in-law, and he's Catholic. He wouldn't buy it. So those are the things that you get.
Could you speak just for a minute about the connection between the issues of environmental sustainability and poverty?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. Yeah, at this climate conference, there was a big session on that. What you heard about with the environmental justice issue with David Scott in the landfill. I mean, these people, so what they do is expand the dumps in their area. There's an area called Cancer Alley in Louisiana and Mississippi where there's all these chemical plants. These people can't do anything about it. They're getting sick. They can't have lawyers. We were lucky in Eden Prairie that all the right pieces came together. In fact, in Eden Prairie, there was a developer who was putting up a dream house, and it was like 1 mile from the dump. So he said, oh my God, nobody's going to buy my dream house. And so he was throwing money at me. He was one of the biggest donors to the lawyer. So they are the most impacted, and Pope Francis is right. He's absolutely right.
I was wondering if you've had a chance to talk to the bigwigs at Georgia Power or the Georgia Public Service Commission folks.
They have been influenced. I was at a conference, again in Washington, D.C. I went to these conferences every year. And a guy came in and he said, did you hear what happened in Georgia? Usually when I hear that, I run. It's usually something bad. He said, the Tea Party and the environmentalists got together and they forced Georgia Power, something having to do with solar power. They are making changes. They're putting in a lot of solar farms in South Georgia. It's not easy because, for example, I tried to put make a Tifton campus solar, and they blocked it. They basically told me, you're not going to do it. It's one of their biggest customers. What, they want to lose UGA Tifton campus? It's going. I mean, the incredible thing is, I do a talk on climate change, and it's impressive to see we're ahead of where we thought we'd be with renewable energy. Here's a story about India. India has 400 million people that have no electricity. They're not going to do landlines. There's not enough metals in the earth to do that. They're just bringing on solar. The price of solar panels has come down enormously. There's a lot of wind farms in this country. You know T. Boone Pickens, the big oil man? His oil's finished. He's made his money. He's putting up wind farms right through the center of the country. He's done. He said that's where the money is. So the train is out of the station. We've just got to keep it going, and we cannot burn down the Amazon forest.
I just want to thank Susan for coming this evening and sharing her story and the inspiration for us to keep moving. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.